Well, we've got a few people here, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to round two of Do I Really Need to Model That, the MEP version. We're going to continue our discussion from the first time about, do I really need to model that? And what are some of the common challenges, pitfalls, and things we need to overcome in the MEP space, right? From a design and contracting perspective. Okay, guys, just in case you weren't here last time, I'm gonna go around the screen, have everybody kind of introduce themselves a little bit, tell you where they work, what they do, and kind of like how long they've been doing the whole BIM thing. So I'll start with Mr. Villeneuve since he's in my upper left-hand corner of my screen here.
Thanks, Don. Dan Villeneuve. I'm the BIM and Technology Manager at Fitzemeyer and Tocci. Been doing this for a little more than 20 years. Started out as an HVAC designer and found my way towards the technology side of things.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Mr. Adams, your turn.
I'm Jake Adams. I work for the Waldinger Corporation. I'm the electrical VDC manager. I've been working in Revit for 10 years now, so MEP for 7.
Okay. So. Well, thanks for being here today, Jake. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And the lover of all things symmetrical, Mr. John Atkinson.
Yeah, I'm John Atkinson, National Engineering BIM Manager for DLR Group. Kind of like Dan, I've been in this business for over 20 years now.
Long time. Thank you so much for being here today, John. Mr. Binkley, you're up.
Good morning, everyone. Brian Binkley here. I work for Gephardt Electric. We're a design build electrical contractor based out of the Twin Cities, also operate out of the Memphis market. I am a registered electrical engineer. I am not quite at 20 years. Last week was year number 19. So I'll join the 20-year group next year at this time. And I've been with Gephardt now for the last 7 years and overhead our design department, BIM VDC, and been doing Revit for about 10 years or so.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for being here today. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And Miss Sutherland, your turn.
Hi, guys. I am Amber Sutherland. I work at BG Building Works. I have been in the industry for about 11, 12 years now, doing Revit about 10. And we are a design build firm as well. We handle mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and I'm the BIM service leader here. I didn't know if I said that, so happy to be here though.
Well, thanks for your time today, Amber. Mr. Guither.
Hi, Don. I'm Blake Guither, work for Gausman and Moore. Gausman and Moore has offices in Minnesota and California. I reside in the northern office. I like the cold and I like the summer and the lakes. I'm a friend to these guys and a friend to others. I've been doing Revit modeling for, I don't know, 10 years or so. And I enjoy playing disc golf.
Well, thanks for being here today, Blake. Really do appreciate it. And Mr. Espinoza, you're up. Last but not least.
Don, I am Lucas Espinosa, the BIM manager at RZ Design Associates. We're located in the Hartford area of Connecticut, Rocky Hill. We're a MEP and structural engineering firm. Spend a lot of my time doing exactly what we're going to talk about today, advising and working with the production team on what to model and how to model it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lucas. Thanks for being here today. Really do appreciate your time, and everybody, obviously you're shaving off some time out of your busy schedules today. So I appreciate it. And I'm sure the people in attendance appreciate it as well. And guys, as long as we're talking about people in attendance, this is an open forum, everybody. So if you have questions throughout this discussion, go ahead and feel free to type them into the chat or the Q&A, and we will answer those questions in kind. So once again, thank you all for being here today, and thank everybody in attendance for your time today as well. I was going to get things kind of started here, guys. I spent some time going over the first session and diving into some of the things that we were talking about, and kind of wanted to expand on some of those themes that we were discussing at the first session. And I thought we'd start off with a little bit of a fun question today. And I want an answer from every panelist on this one. What is the craziest or oddest, weirdest story you have around an LOD request or requirement that you've gotten? Someone make up an LOD requirement? Did somebody hold you account to say like a LOD 100 means no, LOD 500? You know, what are some of the horror stories or crazy situations you've seen?
I'll kick this off. At my previous job, we had a client who wanted us to come in and model their entire building within, it was like a 1/4 inch of accuracy. And some of this stuff was made in like 1975. So Revit didn't even know how to do some of the fittings. We had to get really creative to model this building accurately. And these mechanical rooms were just insane. And we were going in there and measuring to the exact inch. We had like our laser measures and our measuring tape. And we had laptops on site that we had to have Revit so we could model the pieces as we went. And it was just, it took us, we were there every day modeling the guts and just the architecture of this building for a few months. But it was probably the most detailed building I've ever done.
In that situation, Amber, would you say that post your modeling of that in the build process, was there a benefit to all that work you put in up front?
I mean, yes, I would, because normally me and my staff are just production and we handle, you know, prior to construction and everything. So to see the aftermath and some of the stuff that construction does to get it to work, I learned a lot. And I believe it was beneficial because the building manager was also there with us, kind of seeing how it was, because we also had to be putting data into this stuff because they wanted a live, actual, something we've never heard of, an actual Revit model that reflected their building that they could go in and see, all right, these light bulbs are in these fixtures. And when were they replaced? An actual functioning Revit model. So it was very educational.
Amber was doing digital twins before it was a buzzword.
Seriously. Who do you think started it?
It's quite the buzzword now.
There you go.
That's for sure.
Dawn, I had an experience, or an early experience. It was probably in Revit 2008, 2009, early versions of Revit. We thought we knew everything we needed to know about Revit, and not even close. But the client at that time wanted every parameter from every cut sheet to be included within the model. And their intent was that they wanted it connected to the facility management of their choice, the facility management application of their choice, and link them together as if the parameters were going to magically just recognize each other. And unfortunately, you know, we never actually connected with the facility management software vendor of choice, and that conversation never really picked up. And we over detailed with our parameter values for ultimately no benefit or value at the end of the day. But it was a requirement of the project, high-end client, and it was challenging. The idea was there. We were excited to take the challenge on, but it actually never got really steamrolling ahead with a working feasible approach. And I think that was just before really LODs and BIM execution plans really came into play, which probably would have benefited if it was a little bit later on in the cycle. 2013, 2014, maybe we would have been able to successfully complete that.
Sure. Side question here, guys. Have you been noticing an influx or a rise in the requests for BIM to operations types of models? Or are you seeing that in the industry? You're seeing more people say, hey, I want to take this whole BIM model and use it for building automation and operations post construction?
I'll jump in there on that. So of the projects that I've been involved with, we've actually only had one where the owner specifically was looking to make use of the model for facility management. And it was several years ago, and there was quite a bit of an effort to put in a lot of the data into the model, added in all these special parameters, only to find out that the owner isn't making use of the model. So it's kind of sad and a little disappointing that we did go through that effort to give them the data, and they're not making use of it. But for at least for the clientele that we've been working with, we have not seen a very much of an uptick in the requests from an owner side of realistically using it for facility management.
Right. Yeah, still a lot of parts and SKU numbers to add to a lot of things before that's super beneficial. It kind of seems like, the design to fabrication model will be utilized heavily a lot more first than the operations side. But yeah, I've seen more requests down in that direction from contractors looking to utilize our models versus operations at this point. But
Sure.
I would agree with Blake there. Those are the ones I see the most. Like I've gotten some, hey, can we do this with facilities? Inquiries. They've obviously seen it somewhere else before, heard people talking about it, but no one over here is really, at least that we've worked with, is really wanting to dive into it and really go after it. But on the construction side, yeah, more and more we're seeing those requests for models, and it's a bit of a gray area handling currently with that, at least over here. What do we want to give? And what's the disclaimer that comes with that as well? Because what are we actually modeling? What can you trust? What can't you trust? And I don't want to be held to a fire we're not ready for.
It'll surely take off when there's an Amazon button in Revit that says order me more filters, and the facilities management can do things like that. But that integration isn't there yet.
Yeah, I know we're actually got some clients that have requested using the Revit model with their FM, but on top of that, we're also adding high performance design with sensors and everything else. So we're looking at tracking people, machinery, usage, and everything.
Yeah, in my experience with that, guys, is basically that starts to fall apart when we start talking about the request, rather, for facilities maintenance starts to fall apart when we start talking about everything that needs to be structured at the very beginning stages of the project so that we can roll that into facilities maintenance. You got to standardize, Dan, you kind of talked on it already. Your shared parameter file is going to be a big deal if you're going to extract all that data and go to facilities management software. And having that all straight across all the different parties who are on a project, that's a tall ask in a lot of respects if we don't do that initially.
Some of those perpetual projects seem like good applications for facilities management, like airports, just that perpetual work. Those models are always being updated, worked on, modified. Getting the facilities management team up to speed in some of those models, it seems to serve a better purpose. But those static models where construction's done and facilities doesn't know how to leverage the information. It's
right.
I think you touched on a really big point there too, Don, that if your goal is to do that, you need to be talking about that from day one. You need to, the foundation has to be set, whether it's for fabrication or facilities management, whatever. That's not something you can just do halfway through at the end of a project. There's way too many cards, there's way too many pieces that need to be set for that.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I know I kind of cut off the LoD horror stories conversation there. Anybody else got an LoD horror story that they want to share?
So kind of related, but on the quantification side, multi-residential projects is really where I see the biggest variance in how much is actually modeled in a building. You know, some people make model groups and those get placed throughout, and some people are just doing the heavy detailing in one place. I had a model where I had all of it modeled in model groups and placed and had everything connected. And we got to a VE effort. Of course, the project's over budget, you know, big surprise. And, you know, we were looking at VE items, and I was able to see, in this case, the contractor was kind of already on board, which helped this process, but I was able to see his numbers for piping quantities, takeoffs, and things like that. And I took a look in the model because all the piping was there. And it was my first project where I saw there was over a mile of copper piping for domestic cold water, which was fun for me. But being able to share that with the contractor and the owner, you know, right there, it's like, guys, you know, if we really want to start focusing on certain numbers, you know, so in this case, that level of D related to quantification effort, and he was like 50% over on a lot of those piping takeoffs. So
probably operating under the assumption that it wasn't modeled.
Yeah. Right.
Well, there's no more LoD horror stories, guys, we actually have some questions coming into the chat here. And if everybody who's in attendance, if you want to hear the LoD horror stories from each of these individuals, I'm sure they would be more than willing to share their LoD horror stories with you. There's always a nugget of learning inside of those. But we did get a comment in here, guys, and I just want to ask the panelists to keep this in mind as well. We're obviously using a lot of acronyms. Our industry is full of acronyms. We happen to have some attendees here who are new to the industry, and they don't quite know what all the acronyms stand for yet. So LOD, level of development, right? FM, facilities maintenance. And if there's anything else that we say, guys, inadvertently, sorry, we've all been doing this as you've heard for quite a while, and so those acronyms are part of our vocabulary at this point. But if we shoot something out and you don't know what it is, just type it into the chat. We'll clarify for you. No problem.
On that, I'll just say this as a general piece of advice for people that are new to the industry and working with Revit and BIM models and whatnot. That whole LOD thing, in your contracts, make sure you clearly define what that is and what you're actually providing. That is one the horror stories that I've had are really just getting held to a fire that we weren't ready for because we did not clearly define what we were actually doing in the project. And, you know, all of a sudden bad relations start happening and people want something, but that's not what was provided. So yeah, make sure you understand what those LODs are and that your client understands as well what you're actually providing.
Right. And I think that's a good segue there, Lucas, into the next thing that I want to talk about. And then we'll get to the questions from the audience. Want to talk a little bit, guys, because we got into this last time about BIM execution plans, BEPs, BEPs, or what some people call them BXPs as well. But we talked about, you know, it being a good idea to have one. We talked a little bit about how we've seen a trend in the industry where we're getting away from some of these, where like versus 2 years ago, everything started with a BIM execution plan. Now we're getting some projects where there isn't a kickoff meeting and there isn't a BIM execution plan. So we've kind of regressed, if you will, a little bit. And I wanted this panel to kind of comment on what makes a good BIM execution plan. You know, what are some of the things that you want to make sure that you're covering on a kickoff BIM meeting? Let's start there. We want to make sure we have answers to these questions. What are some of those questions?
So a definition of roles and responsibilities.
Okay.
Means of communication. You know,
File naming is a big one. How you're breaking out those files.
Thank you, Jake. I think that is huge. That saves hours a week for just having to, if you're the guy coordinating all the models, that saves a ton of time.
I would say whether or not you're using shared coordinates has been a huge one for me, because we a lot of times will get into CD level and then all of a sudden the model gets moved 5,000 feet up in the air because they wanted it at actual elevation, and sometimes that just doesn't work with our systems and it causes a lot of headache on ours. Or just the communication of rotating chases as well, because again, with mechanical and plumbing risers, that's a lot harder to do, to rotate those.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's really important is responsibilities in regards to family content. Who's modeling what? You know, I hate to see two things modeled where then we're getting confused on what's what. like roof drains, showing in an architect's model and showing up in our model, So just defining who's doing what and getting people to look at the other thing instead of spending time recreating it.
Yeah, especially when it comes with light fixtures. That's the most annoying thing, to have the architect's light fixtures there that take up the 2x2 grid. We host ours, and then we can't actually host to it because theirs is cutting that ceiling.
I was just going to say light fixtures.
Yep.
Another thing is the frequency and regularity of model updates, just to get the expectations laid out early.
Lucas, did you have something to add there?
Dan covered the big one for me. That's one that I asked that question at the start of every project. How do you want to do this? What's the schedule? And that's where BIM 360 is definitely the companies that are taking advantage of the whole consume share package. Love it. It's such an easy process. Everyone needs to do it. But if you're not doing that, how are you doing it and how often?
Mm-hmm. Do you guys think it's good to lay out a schedule for BIM meetings, coordination meetings inside of that BEP day one?
At least at the kickoff meeting. Yeah.
I agree with what you said, Don, earlier, that I've actually seen a big drop off in those early kickoff meetings discussing the model collaboration with external firms. We do it internally for our own MEP purposes, but I still think it's a valuable conversation to get on the same page early on. We're just not having those discussions as regularly as we were even 3-4 years ago.
Sure. Any theories on that, guys? Any theories on why we've kind of gone backwards, if you will, for lack of a better term?
Well, in an odd sense, people have actually gotten better with the Revit practices and modeling, and so there is a less of a need. Back when, it was, for me, it was much more important, because architects were all across the board. We were also all across the board, engineers and designers and contractors. So things have gotten better. Really, the biggest gray zone I see now is BIM 360 and how people are leveraging it, how their folder structures, file formats, and and then really leveraging more publication functions and design collaboration within there. But
I think from a contractor's perspective, the more you work with the same contractors over and over again, the more that plan basically stays the same. So I think it's kind of we kind of know what your standards are sort of thing. But the problem with that is it misses some of the project specific items that should be in that plan.
No, good point, Jake. Good point. Got some questions here rolling in, everybody. First question I saw that I think is a relatively short answer for us and kind of just discuss this a little bit. MEP and technology models, are we seeing them more modeled all together in the same environment, or are we still separating out for disciplines? What's kind of the trend there? I've seen it all over the place. I think it's kind of 50-50 still, depending upon project size. Is really what drives that, because file size ultimately drives everything. If the file doesn't open and operate, we can't do much with it. But is anybody else seeing some changes, or what are you guys seeing out there?
I know we're pushing for getting the IT, AV, anybody who's got electrical devices of any sort into the MEP model, but it's still a struggle.
Yeah, we're defaulting to a single model, all trades, until it gets to a larger file size that we just can't maintain. And hopefully Autodesk Construction Cloud and BIM 360 will allow some of that to be eased. But by default, we'd like all trades in the single model. If it approaches architectural model that's going to be above 350, 400 megs in file size, then we start really considering breaking out those trades, which we can do after the fact, after the design is halfway at that point. We're realizing that we're heading towards a problematic area. We'll break them out during design.
Dan, you know what we need? We need a little checkbox where you can lock a work set or something from being selected, man, that would open doors.
Yeah, we, like Dan, we're defaulting a single MEP model. We haven't had to break out yet. I'm really hoping we don't need to, because I do like having the full MEP in one. I mentioned earlier, we are a structural engineering firm as well. That is a separate model from us by default. Because there's really just no need for that one to be inside that model, and those guys to suffer the slowdowns that the MEP guys are. But my hope is that even if we do get past those larger sizes, I've dabbled with the idea of breaking buildings out into different work sets and kind of being able to close and open as necessary there, just to manage some of that. I've done some experimenting there, and it works okay until you start crossing the lines, and that's when things get a little gray. But I guess a large part of that too, I mean, the big conversation of this meeting, are you being efficient with your modeling, or are you over modeling? And if you can be efficient, you can do a lot more with a single model. Don't over model.
Touche, sir.
So it kind of seems like, so we use an MEP model as well, and mechanical and electrical pair up well together. They have to circuit a lot of the mechanical families, and so there's a big benefit to sharing that model. But I don't see everyone combining ever really, but the last remaining area I see tons of duplication efforts is architectural and structural. And I think they may end up in one model, and which would simplify both their lives. And if they could learn how to work together, maybe that would work out. I don't know. That's a mechanical guy's thought. Jake, what do you think?
I love it. Two other parties have to work together. I'm not the problem. I love your thought, Blake. I absolutely love it.
Well, that'd fix the who owns the grid issue, right?
Yes, it would.
Yeah, that really would fix that issue, which is an amazingly simple issue that comes up on every single project. Was one I
had to answer that question about 15 minutes before this meeting.
Yeah, it's
project someone came to. We need to copy monitor grids. Okay, whose grids? You tell me.
Yeah, it amazes me that we still have that conversation on most every project. But we talked a little bit about BIM 360 here, guys. Came up in the discussion with this, and there's a question in here about BIM 360. But how are we leveraging CAD through BIM 360 in the events that we have to? Sounds like Theodore here is having to deal with some CAD links that are coming in through the architectural model, and it's really slowing things down. Does anybody run into that? Still doing a lot of CAD from architects in BIM 360?
Yeah, I mean, a handful of ways to address that. I mean, I guess that this individual has to have a talk with the architect on how they brought in their CAD elements, and whether they imported it directly or whether it is linked, and plenty of ways, isolating it via work sets or via, the import links category within the architect's model. Generally speaking, if it was that type of issue, I would ask the architect to put that CAD file on a work set, because then in the manage links dialog, you could isolate that work set everywhere. That'd be the fastest approach in my mind. But
anybody else dealing with CAD and BIM 360?
And just to minimize it these days. Fortunately,
we've all been lucky enough to not have to deal with CAD backgrounds anymore.
I will say, I mean, Blake mentioned the managed work sets, and that is a fantastic way of, you don't want to see something from the architect, close it off. We've got one particular project right now where they put in these really, really intricate furniture families that basically make it so you can't print from those drawings. And fortunately, they were very open to making some adjustments. They moved them all to a dedicated work set that we could close on our end. And then they put in versions of those models that were not so intricate and could be printed. But that is just, it's a nice little tool to have in the back pocket there.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're talking like a 3D CAD file, one thing that we've done on some of the VDC stuff is actually converting that over to an NWC and bringing in the Navis file. and then just using it in the coordination view that way. It's one way you can do it. It's a little bit quicker, but I mean, you still have some slowdowns.
Well, and WCB a little bit of a lighter file as well, a little bit easier to manage and deal with.
Yeah.
Now that you can bring those into Revit, that does change things a little bit, right? That makes it possible to see what you're designing around.
Yeah, it makes it easier to see what you're going against. It doesn't make it so easy for using it for backgrounds, I guess, would be the way to put that.
Oh, fair enough. Got another question here, everybody. Is it possible for architects to create consultant views so our floor plans match the arc linked model? It's a hassle basically for us to try to match the architect's views and backgrounds. Something we all deal with. My method when I was in the industry was simply to I wouldn't go to the views, I'd go to the sheets, and that's how I would find the views, because I got the paper plans first or the PDF first, and that's what I was related to, and so that just went into the sheets and like, okay, these are my views that I'm going to grab. But curious to hear what the panel has to say on dealing with some of those situations with architects.
I was actually just typing a response to that question. Cancel that. We've an architect that we work with a lot. We have just had the discussion, hey, can you create views that just say linked view or consultant view in front of it, and we just link to those views? Or like you said, Don, I just navigate in the architectural file to whatever they have on their sheet. I just directly link to that view and turn off their annotation. So then my view matches their view. I'm seeing what they're seeing. So that's always worked for us. And we don't even change the view range sometimes, because then I can manipulate it on my end and it doesn't change the background. That's always worked for us.
Tip, Amanda, expert tip.
Thank you.
Yep, exactly what we utilize. And in addition, if you set up your view templates and match that link, you can pre-configure your line weights that you'd like to see from the architectural models, so that architectural firm A, B, or C all have consistent line weights for background purposes from our product.
Yeah, like we try and avoid doing any linking, especially if you've got 200 plus views and you have to do a linked view for each one of them. That's super time consuming, and if anything changes, stuff can go wrong. So getting that view template set up appropriately at the very beginning is much easier. I mean, if you have to do a linked view, fine, but I really don't see a reason to match the architectural view.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll open up that architect's file, open up the visibility of graphics, and then just change my view template on their stuff. So that way it covers it across all 10 floors or whatever it may be.
Yep.
I pretty much do the exact same thing.
So I guess, are you guys actually having to clean up, views more? I'm wondering if this panelist is talking more about the view creation itself, or, because walls are walls, windows are windows in Revit. It's the one great thing that AutoCAD didn't have locked in, and layers were all over the board. So, I mean, yeah, are you guys really spending time cleaning up view templates? Because I guess I don't see that as much an effort.
The biggest one,
I still see in a lot of stuff that we do, Blake, where we'll get architectural models that even the printed views, they're just too busy. Furniture is a big thing, right? Furniture, for example, has a benefit for electrical layout for outlets and things like that. You want to know where some of the furniture is going to be. HVAC and plumbing, I really don't care where your furniture is. And so it's prepping those things. Now we could easily argue that some of this is just tedious and time consuming. It's not like this is a huge heavy lift for us. But in my mind, it's about, well, if it's tedious and time consuming, if we can make it consistent and not have to deal with it, let's do that.
Yeah, and we handle that with an architectural view template for each floor with fern on and fern off. And then each link, so the architectural view that they use for the first floor plan will be mapped in 2 view templates and then applied to all first floor plans. And again, all of that is pre-configured in our starter project. So we don't really handle anything that we want to fine tune and turn off. We do it as a company standard upfront in the template and apply it on all projects.
And I think some of that even comes back to like the CAD discussion that we were just having about linking in CAD and things like that. For me, this all boils down to, is there a value in it for me? Does it benefit me as a designer, as the person doing the layout? So a good point was made by Jose here that most of the CAD links are coming from consultants, right? They're not typically part of the architectural layout. They're the landscape architect, or they're the kitchen equipment consultant, things like that. You know, if I'm not doing anything with landscaping, I don't need that CAD background. I don't even need to bring that thing with me. And so I just completely forget about it, right? Same thing in views. If I don't need certain things, and, you know, along the lines of what we've been discussing, guys, we can sit down prior to the project and discuss, well, do we need this element in this view, or this element in this view, or this is a must in this view? Blake, you touched on it. Shutting things off categorically in Revit is part of the advantage of Revit, and being able to make some of those decisions pre getting into a project.
Yeah, I kind of see part of the problem is architects are modeling more detail, you know, and they're leveraging more family categories. And that's where I think even me myself, you know, we are missing some items in the front end because, you know, we never came across those items before, but no, we don't want to. And that's where drawings are getting more cluttered because there's just flat out more information and detail there. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've seen some of our disciplines have been using linked views, at least in the past, mainly because they just wanted to have the architectural room tags. And you know, we're slowly steering them into using spaces. I mean, they never used them, never seen them yet. So I mean, that was a big change that some of our disciplines have had. It's just using the tools that they have available in MEP.
So also related to views, matching the architect, you know, one of the big things I still see today really underutilized is dependent view functionality. You know, and it doesn't benefit every project, but larger projects with different areas definitely can have benefits. And so CTC software, they definitely have in development. If I can talk about that or not, you know, there's
Too late now, Blake. You're in for a penny, in for a pound, baby.
Oh no, there's tools related to more view creation and call out creation and sheet creation related to dependent view functionality, which all boils down to where your scope boxes are. And so, you know, you talk about the BIM execution plan. What's really relevant is, you know, sitting down with the guy that set up the first Revit model and talking about where he's setting up his, you know, dependent views, where they're doing all their detailing, so you can match that, you know, and you get 7-8 scope boxes in place, and you know, you can create a bunch of views and sheets really fast. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just reading through some of these questions here, guys, and I think Wayne was going where I was going with the categorical discussion. We mentioned that, you know, part of the advantage of Revit is being able to turn things on and off categorically and controlling the visibility, right? But that does not mean that users cannot pick categories that aren't necessarily the proper categories. And as we all have come to figure out, certain categories in Revit give you certain capabilities and some categories don't. Curious to hear the panel's thoughts on what is there a category above all else, guys, that is maybe overused in the models that you're getting at Ford Links?
Generic models.
Generic model.
Yeah.
It got to the point with one project. I created we don't use generic models at all. I created a schedule for generic models, put it on our start page, so that when people come into the project, there is a big list that shows you exactly which ones are being used. And Wayne touched on it in his comment there that, you know, the only real, maybe you guys have other ideas, the only real strategy I've taken there is view filters that say, find this generic model, and I'm going to use this view filter to turn it off.
So Lucas, are you saying filter a schedule of the links for generic model elements?
Yeah, schedule that lives on my start page that link, you know, by, you know, show elements from links and that list has gotten long on some projects, unfortunately. And it's just, it's a nice heads up. Hey, you're going to need to keep your eye out for this because they put something on this category.
Sure.
Well, it seems the general path is, when things were more shoddy out there with family content, generic models was leveraged a lot more. And as things have gotten better, things have been migrating into their appropriate categories. And I've seen it get better and better over the years. And so maybe it still comes up when you're working with maybe a new architectural client and they're new to Revit, and kind of you're going back 2-3 years ago of how it looked like before. But I've seen it get better for sure from generic models.
One
I
more
think it's,
reason,
go ahead, Brian, sorry.
I was just gonna say one more reason to look forward to 2022 with what is about a dozen new different categories that we now have. So hopefully people will start taking advantage of the new categories that came out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a new one, Brian?
Yeah, we have several new ones.
What categorical games are you playing, Brian?
I don't play games. I keep all my stuff pretty straightforward, but it'll be nice to have some of the other disciplines making better use of the categories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the bane of my existence has always been specialty equipment. That's been the one category that I just absolutely loathe. And I've been using Revit long enough prior to Autodesk buying it, where I know what that category was intended for. And I don't think most people were ever educated as to what that category was ever really meant to be used for. Kind of like generic model.
Don, are you saying it's not for a fire extinguisher and a toilet paper holder?
Yes, it's exactly what I'm saying, Greg. It's exactly what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
And for those of you out there who didn't know what specialty equipment was originally intended for, that was originally intended for owner-provided equipment that mechanical needed to make connections to. That's why you can't cut it with a section. That was the whole point behind it, because it was owner-provided equipment. So it was stuff that wasn't even in your model. But since I know a lot of people on this call have taken their liberties with Revit categories to gain functionality that they need, I'm not going to hold that against anybody else changing Revit categories to gain functionality. So I can understand why you would do that. Reading through the questions here, couple comments on the view stuff that we were talking about, shutting things off by category. We just got done talking about a little bit, but we have another comment here about unchecking the Revit link from a view template. Why I don't use link views, because now I lose the ability to globally control the link via view templates. And I thought when we were discussing that, Dan, you had said that you have multiple view templates or a process with view templates that you apply there. Could you expand on that a little bit more? And maybe answers that question.
Sure. So we have basically a Revit link view template, first floor, no fern, Revit link view template, first floor with fern. And everything's pre-configured. And the trick there is when we apply the custom link from the architectural view that we want to point to, it's already, the view template has it set to custom. And when we apply the view template link, we go to by link, select the link, and go back to custom. If you do that process before you hit the apply button, then all of your custom line weights that you've pre-configured inside your model categories, whether that's line weights, whether that's hiding certain solid fills, whatever it might be, those custom configurations maintain. So you can still utilize the default settings of the architectural model, but manipulate what it looks like inside of the view template. Apply it on all the views that you want. And then if you have that instance where designers or somebody in the project go in and change the view template or turn off the view template in the view, or change the model categories in the view rather, then we can reapply that view template on a regular basis. The idea of those view templates is to maintain consistency across all the trades, which if we don't have some form of standardization, each of the trades is going to manipulate those model categories to their own preferences. So the only person that is applying view templates on views is our project coordinators who manage the background aesthetics for the entire project. Hopefully that answers the question, Don.
I'm hoping for as well, but that was Jason. Jason, let us know if that answered your question or if you want to expand on that some more, and we can definitely get into it with this group.
Well,
And
and
Dan,
Don,
one of my,
actually,
oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Amber.
sorry, Blake.
No.
I was going to say, I actually responded to Jason's question about I think that was my response of unchecking the Revit links within the template. How we do it at our firm is that our model managers set up the project entirely, and we don't have large, like we've had a few multifamilies or lodges and everything, maybe 6 levels, so not that big, but we'll set up one set of floor plans to where we just have the template, we link each view, we link specifically to that level or that view in the architectural model that's on their sheet, like level 1, level 2. We turn off floor patterns or furniture if needed, but then we use the ArchiSmart add-in and just duplicate all those views for all of our disciplines. And we have them all set up. And if they need to manipulate backgrounds at all, we have coordination views. So then what's on the sheet, they don't ever have to change. They just have to tag their stuff, and then they can manipulate the coordination views as needed.
Okay.
So Don, I've been doing some view template cleanup as well. And, we were coming across a lot of issues where we were getting multiple architectural models, and we had a placeholder link for one situation, but, maybe it's a core and shell construction, or maybe, lots of situations where you could have multiple models, or an existing building model and a new expansion model. And so what I realized is, well, for one, you can transfer view templates to other models, but all the links reset to by host view. And so it's really the links settings information is what you lose when you're transferring view templates. And so a lot of our view templates, we have actually migrated back to by host view and by default, and we're leveraging that as much as we can before going custom. And the one case remaining I see where custom is still needed is in annotations. So in annotation, that category from the architect, typically we have most of that turned off related to grids, reference planes, all that stuff. So that's like the one area I'm still seeing where we have that need to go custom in our view templates. But most of the model categories we're now controlling in our host view template, which makes it simpler for adding more models.
Blake, how are you controlling the turning off the annotations in the linked model if you're not using custom?
Well, it is custom, but model categories is still by host view.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, so I've done the same thing with all my view templates. Is every single link, the annotations is custom, and I essentially have every annotation turned off minus 1 or 2 depending on the situation.
Awesome, guys. I wanted to get to another question here that Spencer had asked, and going back to the facilities maintenance conversation that we were having earlier. I've seen specific requirements, fab parts over BIM families that come with this FM system requirement. What integrations have any of us seen between Revit and an FM system that's actually worked, and which have we seen fail? Be completely honest with you, Spencer, the only one I've ever seen work is building ops, because that's the only one I've only been involved with one project that took it all the way to that level. As we discussed earlier, most projects say they want that, but then it falls apart somewhere along the line, whether that's from a labor perspective or a dollars perspective, right? Or just an organization perspective. One of the big challenges that we do have, Spencer, that we haven't really answered yet, is the simple fact that if you do take out all the Revit parts and put all the fab parts in there, you've lost the ability to house data. No, you can't put operational data on ITM content. And that's kind of the rub. That's kind of the challenge of where we're at right now, because we can't take that fabricated level model and truly turn it into a facilities model. You kind of have to go back to Revit parts and pieces for that. If you want to be able to click on something and know something about it, everything about it, it's got to be a Revit part. And that's where some of the challenge lies. Brian, Jake, you guys are contractors and you're getting into some of that. Have you kind of seen the same thing, same challenges, or is there something different that you're running across?
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, we just, we've started creating our own families that are still using the old Revit or using actual Revit content. So that way, we can still house some of that data. But yeah, I mean, when you try to pull something, especially on the mechanical side, when they try to pull something like a valve or something, it makes it a little bit harder to keep some of that data and make sure that it stays correct as well.
Mhm. And then that's just, I think that, guys, that's the hump that we all need to get over before we start seeing a lot of facilities maintenance stuff come across and actually get carried to fruition. Is, if the requirement from the contractor is an LoD 500 model, how do we leverage that with facilities maintenance? That's always the question.
Yeah, the other hurdle is, so they buy this building and they want to do this for their facilities maintenance, and then you tell them, hey, you got to have someone who's trained in how to use this, and they're like, oh, well, we don't have that, and then they don't realize what an investment that is as well on their side, to have someone who's trained to actually keep this up and moving and going forward. So especially when you get into tracking like serial numbers and part numbers and things like that, if you replace, a driver on something, you have to update all that.
Right. And one of the biggest questions I have for facilities maintenance that wants access to the Revit file is, well, who's your Revit operator on staff? Who's going to make sure that, like you just alluded to, Jake, that not only the model is up to date, but who's going to know how to open this thing? Who's going to know how to navigate this thing? Who's going to know how to get to the information? It's one thing to go to the mechanical room, look up on the shelf, pull down the O&M manual, blow the dust off, and start flipping through to find what you need in there. It's something different to fire up a computer, get into a Revit model, and start navigating around to find what you're looking for.
I've seen, those clients that are looking for this seem few and far in between, but I love coming across them. For me, it was in a large operations logistics company, and that's exactly what they wanted, and they were doing a bunch of facilities and things like that. So once again, that kind of perpetual type Revit modeling work, where they're going to get someone up to speed, and it's going to apply to lots of places. And I mean, that's where it makes sense, not the one and done, new construction project. But
Yeah, we got a follow up here. If the owner wants to bring the model to facilities management, is the engineer expected to turn the model over to the contractor to fully detail everything? I feel like that would get really messy in an as-built coordination process. Speaking as somebody who's gone through that, yes, it does. It gets extremely messy. Engineers and the contractor really need to communicate. In my experience, that's a design build, design assist style contract, so that we are forced to communicate already. But yeah, when we had talked about facilities maintenance earlier, guys, we stressed how important it is to get your ducks in a row at the beginning of the project. You something that is very difficult to insert midway through a project. And so, like, one of the first things I always hit, as I mentioned before, is shared parameters. What are your data points that you want to get into the facility? You have, I need to get that defined for me by the people who are running the facility. And then I'll figure out how to put them in the Revit model. But you got to first tell me what it is you want from a data perspective, where you kind of want it, and then I can take it from there. Most of my experience, when I've asked that question, they all kind of give you the deer in headlights look, and they're like, what, we actually have to participate in this? Like, well, yeah, that's part of the deal. But anybody else got any comments on that and kind of that process?
Not a firsthand comment, Don, but I've heard that there's a lot of promise from Maximo's standpoint on passing over parameter data from Revit to facility management, and Maximo serving as a conduit in connecting the data from one parameter to another between the two applications. Again, it's not firsthand knowledge. I've spoken with a gentleman here locally to me. He's a Autodesk vendor, and he's looking to develop that as one of his tool sets that he can train on. So we're very interested in what he can do with it. As this grows legs, I think that might be a tool that we can leverage moving forward.
The other thing to keep in mind, guys, is that how many different versions of facility maintenance software are there out there? You know, if you just were to Google facilities maintenance software, you would probably be pretty easy to find 30 or 40 different offerings that you could get. And that's always a big part of the question too, for me is, well, now that I know maybe what the end deliverable is, how is it going to be consumed? Because that's going to drive a lot of how I get to structure the data, especially upon export, right? Obviously, you will probably need a third-party tool to export the data out of Revit, even to get into facilities maintenance. Standard CSV files are pretty common, but you don't have native ability to export that out of Revit without a tool, at least to my knowledge. So just something else to keep in mind. So we've got a little bit of time left, guys, and so I wanted to come to this one last question here before we wrap up. We mentioned earlier, I believe it was you, Blake, about being able to give the contractor relatively accurate quantification for piping out of a Revit model. How often do you share the length/counts of materials with a contractor? And if so, what kind of disclaimer are you providing to that contractor in the event that your count was off?
I got some thoughts on this. I don't know why everyone's so scared. You know, why is everyone so scared of what's in your model? You know, it's your model. You know, like if you place an extra piece of equipment and it shows up in a schedule, you placed an extra piece of equipment. If you missed something, you missed it. You know, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. The models aren't perfect, but so I'm not scared. The piping, I don't give contractors the lengths of piping. First, I build a relationship and prove to them the integrity of my modeled information and try to lure them back to me for help in material takeoffs and things like that. So if you got things connected and, you know, and if you've done flow propagation, you know, and you know your fixture units are throughout a system and whatever, you know, if those things are in place where you know, there's a pretty good chance here you've got everything covered. It's all there. So there's no value yet in us sharing on the design side and us sharing that. So, you know, there still is, we're still in the proving ground. So for the contractors on the panel, I totally get our design models are not there yet, you know, but I consider myself in the proving ground, and I'm gonna prove to you guys that these models are what you need them to be, to trust them, to use them for takeoffs, to want to use them and take them further to fabrication. So I think we'll get there, but.
And in all fairness, not all design models are created equal, right? Some engineers, firms, I've seen some of their design models, and you question what was done. And others you look at and you go, wow, that's a really good quality model. Theodore, the real answer is like, if I'm a contractor and I've got your BIM model, that's not hard for me to do. I just whip up a couple schedules and I can figure out exactly how much of what you have in here, whether or not that's accurate, something different. Do I want to base my number on your design is always the question from a contractor's perspective, because as we've gotten to it, I believe very early on in the conversation, it tends to be that once it gets to the contracting level, the design starts to get a lot less complicated, because we're looking at, you know, counts of fittings, for example, is a big thing, especially in sheet metal, because each one of those fittings could be $300. And so if I can eliminate a couple, I'm saving myself some money.
And then go ahead. I was just going to say the difference between connected length versus, you know, material lengths that the contractor is going to need. Those are never going to match anyways. So, you know, here is the design. This is the lengths that are there.
So I love where your head's at, Blake. And unfortunately, we've had a few bad experiences with a handful of contractors, and we've actually gone in the complete opposite direction now. We've pushed to not even distributing the Revit models, instead pushing it to NWC and sharing that instead, just as a safer method of sharing. It's unfortunately, you know, just a few bad instances were enough to kind of say, it's not worth the risk right now. What could potentially happen there, you know, holding us to what was in the model, but not the drawing, whatever the discrepancies there. Like I said, I like where your head's at with it, and I'd like to believe that someday we can, you know, they can trust what's in our model, and we can trust that, okay, if there's a mistake, there's not going to be a lawsuit that comes down, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, for right now, we're playing it on the safe side. NWC files, no Revit models.
And I think that changes, guys, region to region. And I also think that we're still at the crossroads of a legal battle that is catching up to the capabilities of the technology, right? We talked about this last time. The process for 100 years that we've been adjusting to and been using is not going to be the process that takes us over the next 100 years. Things need to be changed. That's the reason we're all having this discussion today. And I think we're in a position where legal documentation is still trying to catch up to what the roles and responsibilities on a project actually are today. We still got a lot of PMs that are trying to leverage that contract they wrote 40 years ago. Can't do that anymore.
I think a lot of that too comes back to, the whole LOD discussion. How much are you modeling? What are you modeling? And, there are times when we're taking shortcuts. We're trying to, we got maybe a bad fee or low fee on a job, and we don't have the time to invest in that full on LOD, get all the flows and whatnot going. We just need to get drawings out. Well, that model's really just not going to be reliable. And it's, unfortunately, the immediate gut is, oh, they did it in Revit. Should be able to just take that and start our work, but it's not the case all the time.
Every project's different.
Yeah.
Every single one.
So Don, we're basically out of time, but I have 100-year-old question I would love to ask the panel.
100-year-old question?
Yep.
I don't think if you add all the panelists together, we're at 100 years old, Blake.
Yeah,
I'm
probably
interested.
not. You guys ready?
Yeah.
100-year-old question?
Shoot. We'll call this. Do I really need to model that the extended cut?
Extended cut. Okay, guys. 100-year-old question. Are we ready to move away from all caps text?
Yes.
What do you mean ready? I've been ready for years, bud.
Please.
Why? I love it. Why would you leave that?
You just want to throw a grenade in and walk out, Blake? Is that what you're trying to do here?
Come on, guys. What do you think? Come on.
I personally like the all caps text.
Sure.
I mean, I remember like learning how to like handwrite it in school, and then just typing. And
I'm with you, Amber. Actually, my normal handwriting is all caps because
yeah, it's just ingrained in us.
came up through grade school, middle school doing drafting, and that's that is my handwriting now. So.
All right. So we got 2 over there.
I'm sticking all caps.
Jake, you're
I'm
taking
with you,
that,
Blake.
right?
I
Okay.
am.
All right,
Get rid
Don's
of
on
them.
the side. Okay, we got 1 to 3. Let's close this up.
Man, I'm on the fence. I have to say, I like space, and if you remove those caps, you can
That's right.
gain quite a bit of
That's right.
space,
Yep.
especially
right,
on those
Dan.
electrical legends. I need that space back.
Yeah.
But at
Again.
the same point, that hand drafting is, it's still with me. There's a nostalgic, value to it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go functionality and go no caps.
Yeah. All right, we
Nice.
got 2 to 3. 2 to 3. Lucas.
We're keeping score.
I like
Let it go
the
for sure.
I like the idea of title case mainly because abbreviations will stick out better. So if you are doing no caps, if it's all caps, then it all just kind of runs together and becomes illegible. Personally, but
So wait,
so
where did you end up? Yeah.
So you won,
Yeah.
Blake. You won. Yes, you won.
No.
no.
100-year-old question, guys. We just decided it. It's settled.
If we just determine a new national standard right here.
Let everyone know.
These are how these
Never
things
give up
work.
my all caps.
Should be the MEP BIM Standards Committee for the US right here. That's for sure. We get a lot more done.
I just hate when you have them mixed. Like you have majority of the documents in all caps, and then there's like one schedule that has the intermixed. It's like, what were you doing?
Every project.
That was Blake trying to squeeze it in there.
Right.
One schedule at a time.
Yeah.
Or a linked Excel doc.
Yep. I like that, John. I wasn't thinking that though. The abbreviations would stand out more.
Quite a bit more.
With, if everything was in all caps. But either way, Amber, I totally get. It looks cool and good, and I don't try to change those preferences at all. I was just curious.
Well, on that note, that's a nice way to end it up and wrap it up, Blake. So thank you so much for that 100-year-old question. I really do appreciate it.
That's cool. Cool.
So for the people that are still around, thank you so much for coming. Obviously, guys, the panelists, thank you so much. You're carving, you know, personal time out of a very busy schedule, I am sure, to spend some time with us in the industry. And guys, it really is appreciated. I know that the clients appreciate it. And everybody, if you weren't able to check out session 1, it's on YouTube right now. So you can go ahead and go check that out on the ATG YouTube page. But other than that, thank you so much for coming today. Everybody on the panel, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
All right, guys.
See
We'll
you
do
next
this again.
time.
Yes, we'll do this again. All right, guys. Have a good day.
Too.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.